On today's episode, I speak with my team, Camille and Marika, about all of our enlightened concepts from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and then some. Welcome to the Holistic Life Navigation Podcast, where we explore life through the lens of somatics. I'm Luis Mujica, a somatic educator who teaches people how to find safety in themselves. Your turn to learn begins now. Okay, we are here. Let's start by just seeing how we're feeling. Marika, what's going on?
I'm feeling actually pretty good. I got sleep for the first time in like 100 years, and I know, and just a good Monday. It feels like a good day to do this.
How about you, Camille? What's going on?
Feeling pretty good. Yeah, Mondays are usually a nice flow for me, and particularly this last weekend, I experimented with putting my phone away from like Friday afternoon all the way till Sunday evening, and that was really nice.
Marika, what's going on for you over there?
That's aspirational for me. It's usually just connected to my hand,
It's like all the time. You have one of those like those runner straps, but you have one on your hand.
Yeah, when I fall asleep, my husband will come and grab it out of my hand, like he has to forcibly separate us.
You auto-regulating with your phone?
Kind of.
Chronically. So I've been wanting to talk about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids because we watched it a little while ago with Lyra. I haven't watched it since I was like probably Lyra's age. And so we watched it and I was like, I think this movie informed so much for me about animism and human supremacy, actually. And I was like, I want to talk about this with you too and see where so I just kind of want to like drop that and just see where we can go from there.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So I think what interested me was this, like in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, there's that perspective change. And the piece that really gets me is when the father flicks a cigarette into the yard and the cigarette hits the lawn and the kids are these tiny insect-sized, creatures. And this explosion and eruption and spark occurs and just like desolates the land, right? But you would never know that because we're so big. And I don't know, something about it kind of just took me into this place of, oh, that's where the seeds started being sown. Like these movies that are really cheesy on one hand, they sow these seeds. And for me, that one of the seeds that were sown were, oh my gosh, there's so many other life forms that I'm not even aware that I'm like harming all the time. And at first there was a lot of guilt growing up. Like when I became a vegetarian, it was out of guilt. But now I'm at a place of really just loving the whole destruction life cycle from like a gratitude place. But I'm curious, I don't know if you, like, even when I say that, where does that go for you?
So I immediately go to Auntie in the movie. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
As a kid, it was a super cheesy part, but it sticks out for you, even then, 10 years old or whatever. It's like, ant, I could crush an ant. What is that? Even in the realm of animals that I could relate to, an ant, that is insignificant. But in that movie, not so much. They actually establish a bond with Auntie and Auntie with them. And it was just, and particularly the relationship they established with them. It's so weird how things stay in your mind as a kid. But it was, the boys really trying to not colonize, but, force the ant to their will. And it was the girl who was like, here's a cookie. And and through that, they were able to establish a relationship. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Even that example right there of like dominate the ant or create a relationship with Auntie. I cried even at this age. When I was like, Auntie. So when he said that, I was like feeling that in my heart. What about you, Marika?
Auntie kind of messed me up because from then on, I was like, how many people have I murdered?
Yes, that's right.
And also I worried about the kids, fictional children, by the way. Like, how do they not know they're just trampling all over Auntie's, family, or, because I was, when it came out in 1988 or 9,
I think.
And I think I saw it in the theater. And so Auntie was huge, even though they were all very small, but it really did, it kind of it wasn't like a trauma or anything. It just sort of freaked me out because I realized how many things I just didn't never notice, ants, bugs, things that fly around, like, and so, yes, I think it did also really, I also just wanted to be little.
Oh yeah.
Could this potentially happen to me? Because that'd be cool.
Oh yeah. I remember, and there was like Indian in a Cupboard.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and there was another one too. I don't remember what it was called. Remember that weird one with like the tiny dinosaurs in the miniature golf place? See, I'll say this and everyone looks at me like that. Eamon calls it a cover memory. She's like, it's a cover memory with Luis. This movie doesn't exist. That was an alien abduction. You've been replaced with this memory. But there's this memory I have of these dinosaurs that help an ailing miniature golf course like it rehabilitate itself.
I'm just gonna go to Google.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know.
Let us know
after we finish this podcast.
Let us know when you find it. But it's like miniature. It sparked my memory of the miniature things and how lovely it would be to be little and have like a little person with you. But this is okay. This is where it starts going into like, of course, trauma, because why not? This is why I find trauma. How do I say it? This is why trauma for me isn't a separate thing from us. Like the movie sowed the seeds of, okay, there are other things, right? It's not just about you. And then when I was 19, I read a book called Ishmael. And I remember Ishmael. And that book did the same thing, where this gorilla in a cage essentially teaches this man everything about everything, essentially, like the secrets of life. And there's this one part, and at the time I was taking a train from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to Philly every day to work for this environmental agency. And I'm on the train, and while it's going, I think in the book he's on a train. And all I remember is he says he looks around and he sees all these wires, all these roads, all these advertisements. And he has this epiphany and he says, everything's here for us. Like everything's reflecting our desires and our truths and our bodies and how we move our cars. We don't build it around nature. We build it through nature. And I was on this train. I looked out the window and it had this moment of, whoa, like when I say human supremacy, it's this idea we're born into that everything's here for us. And that heals me actually within the face of trauma, because it's like trauma can't happen to us. It's not fair. It shouldn't happen. It's like, why are we different than nature? Like trauma is an energy that moves through everything. So I've been really getting kind of mind blown lately when I go into this felt experience of I'm no more important than the tree that got struck down by lightning. And there's this like incredible equality that emerges. And I'm just curious where that goes for either of you.
So I'm still stuck on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, because what that brings up for me, and it's a really insignificant scene, but where the little brother Nick, he has a pollen allergy, and
I love she knows all the names. I'm like, I just saw that.
Yeah, I know this movie.
Okay, you know that.
He falls into the flower, and like he and his sister are freaking out because he's allergic to pollen. He's like, oh, but wait, it's too big for me to breathe it in. And so for me, it was at that young age, it was still, the whole movie is about perspective. But for me, that was another way of thinking about perspective, that we can say these things are bad, or XYZ is poisonous. It's not so much that it's poisonous for you, for another being, or if you were in another situation, it may not be poisonous, or what we refer to as poisonous. So that's also how I think about trauma. Like trauma, we can perceive it as being poisonous, but what if we change the perspective? Or that's just what's beginning to percolate in me as I was listening to you.
I'm feeling that. Yeah. What do you think, Marika? I'm just writing something down.
Well, as you were talking about, I was getting more images of like there's so much building going on around us and in Seattle, and how angry I will get when I see them just tearing out all the trees, so they can then build houses and then add other trees, newer trees. I'm glad that they put more trees in, but it's like, it's in the right place and they're in the right line and they look, I'm like, I would rather live amongst the trees that were there. And, and that's not even a thought, it isn't. And so I just see that as, putting the supremacy part, of,
Mhm.
of not taking in, nature basically. And it feels like we just use it, you know. Um, and so yeah, that's the thing that has been going on around here that brings up a lot of charge in me, because it just feels like we're raising everything to the ground, and losing our connection. Because where we live, it used to be all forest. I mean, where everyone lived, it used to be all forest.
Me
but
too. Me
but
too.
even like for in the last 20 years, and yeah, putting our will on it, now we're all like very close together, and so yeah, I've seen that's kind of a way that I see in my adult life, uh, us putting our will on nature.
Well, this is what's interesting to me about that is, did you want to say something, Camille? I thought you light up.
No, yeah, just as Marika was talking, it actually reminded me of, we just did the course, one of the lecture sessions in the course, and we were talking about birth as a really good example of activation and regulation, even though we can fight against it. And that was my experience going into not just my first birth, but all of them subsequently. People would ask, oh, you're having a baby. What does the baby do? Oh, what hospital are you having the baby at? I'm not having the baby at a hospital. I'm doing a birthing center. But you're not getting an epidural. Why would you do that to yourself? That's the question I would get a lot of times. And it was really, particularly the first time, is really disorienting to me, because I just never thought of it as a means of punishing myself. But I know that's how a lot of people will either interpret it for themselves or for me. Like, why you don't have to do that to yourself? Why not take that away? And it wasn't an experience I wanted to take away from me, but like Marika was saying, sort of bend nature to your will. If you can bend nature to your will, why wouldn't you in that situation? And I very much enjoyed both of my birthing experiences, and looking forward to my next one should it come to fruition. And I actually gained a lot by not bending nature to my will, by actually being in nature, just beginning to be in the ebb and flow of it.
See, that right there is like, I learned a lot from not bending it to my will. There's this humility, right? When we just don't bend everything around us to our will. For me, part of the humility is like, I'm no more important than this other thing. So like, in that case, like your comfort isn't any more important than your baby coming through and the pain. Like they don't have to be, the pain and comfort don't have to be good or bad. You don't need one over the other. You can let the nature be what it is. And this is where I'm getting with trauma as a force of nature. We again, I think the reason trauma is so prevalent is because the opposite. We've removed ourselves from nature, and in that post-colonial, that colonized psyche that we've emerged from, we've lost that ability to see it as a part of us and as a part of something that's going to be moving through us for most of our lives. So we see it as like a mistake. We see it as like something that happened that shouldn't have happened. We see it as wrong or dangerous or inconvenient or something to be ashamed of. And I think, I guess if I had a desire with the work that we do, is to just teach people that there's nothing wrong with it. And people listening, like, what do you mean there's nothing wrong with abuse, Louise? Like, what do you mean there's nothing wrong with oppression? It's like, that's not trauma. That's oppression. That's what it is. That body responding to it, that's the thing we call trauma. And I think our overcoupling of trauma with event is why trauma itself and the charge left over from it is overcoupled with like shame or disgust or there's something wrong, because the event was something that you could morally or ethically oppose. And there's still a nature to it all, right? Like my body holding that and responding to it and having all this charge, that's a natural, healthy response to something really big. So what if the charge was this beautiful teacher teaching me what I needed in this moment to recover from this event, instead of this dysfunction I have now from this event?
Yes. And I wanted to say something also to Camille. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But you also said the word, Louise, which is I also did not have drugs when I gave birth to my son, not for lack of trying, but like it was too late and it wasn't going to work, and so they were like, "Hooray, you're in for." But what I noticed after that is people would go, "You had a natural birth," you know what I mean? Like, isn't that the natural thing? Like, but it's really not. And people, people would just judge it, or they would be like, "You're Wonder Woman," or or you, "Oh my God, she was just going to be
You're a hero
than every person on earth." Like, no, it just happened that way, And I certainly didn't. It didn't. Like Camille, it didn't. I didn't have the same experience. Like, I did not like being in my body. That was like one time I can say I really was in my body, but I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
You can't really do much about it. It's like you're in it for it. But I just remember after that, like that it was this weird, unusual thing that I'd had a natural birth, and that it was like sort of the antithesis to what everybody else wanted or what people think you need, which is to never be in pain or to never actually feel what's going on in your body, which isn't 100% positive all the time,
So you just said about to never be in pain. That's like the highlight for me, because that's where the human supremacy thing comes into me. Like we're almost so perverted from our piece of creating, post-industrial revolution, especially, like so much is done for us by robots and computers, and that we just are so comfortable compared to where we've been, even 50 years ago, that there's this concept that like I shouldn't have to feel something uncomfortable. And this is where it leaks into the work you do, Camille, around like capacity for difference. Like it's an inconvenience. I don't have capacity for discomfort. I only want to be in comfortable settings. And that's the polarity of the country, where, is like we can't even handle someone that opposes something we say. We label them as like racist or transphobic or Republican or a Trump or, whatever the term is, just based on their disagreement without even knowing who they are. And so to me, this whole, like when I say human supremacy, which is maybe such a silly word for people listening, to me, it's also related, right? Because like we've de-humbled ourselves from being a part of the elements, and like I could die at any moment. That's okay. That's part of being on this earth. And we've replaced it with all these stories of guarantees that I'm important and I should be preserved at all cost. Like, I'm just so curious about that.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of, I guess, a time in my 20s or so. I just so happened to be like reading a couple of different books and watching a couple of different movies that were about people losing their faith, particularly if they were leaders or within their religion or within their church or their mosque. And what I found really interesting about those situations is that these are individuals who were leaders of their faith. They were counseling people when they would go through really quote unquote undesirable events, and they say, "This is what you should do." But then what would happen is something bad would happen to them. And then that's when they threw up their hands and were like, "Oh, this isn't real. And I just found that to be so interesting to observe, because I do think it goes back to what you were describing, that idea of human supremacy. Like, I shouldn't have to do that. And even then, like, it was like relative to them, but I'm a leader of this faith. Out of all of the people in the world, I shouldn't have to be a person who experiences something bad. And I just remember reading those accounts, those memoirs, or watching those movies, and just being in awe, really, of for lack of a better word, like the hypocrisy of it, that that you could be so shaken by an event because you've already decided that shouldn't have to happen to me because I'm a good person.
As you're talking, I'm getting this image of someone like, waving their fist to the sky and like, well, what did I do to deserve this?
Yes.
It's like, it's such like a cinematic image. And like in my mind, I just hear the answer, you were born. And not like you were born deserving pain, but like you're born. Like there's the myth that I think in this more like quote civilized modern culture, there's this myth of like you're born and everything should be really comfortable and like bad things shouldn't happen. And that myth like tears down our capacity for activating events. And so I get curious, this is especially true for me. I don't know about you two, but for me, I tend to be in like more liberal settings, just based on my beliefs. I'm always the odd one out here because like I'm really like I get along with the Republicans from that viewpoint of like, no, things are going to be hard sometimes. I don't do it as a bully, but to me, like, I don't understand where we're going in our culture of trying to dissipate discomfort. Like I want to build capacity and have resilience. And how do you two navigate that, or where do you find yourselves in this more modern world with these views? So what is that like for you?
Yeah, we've talked about this before, where I'm a big proponent of brave spaces as opposed to safe spaces, and I understand why people want safe spaces, or I understand why people want places and spaces where they won't be abused, of course. But I think we've also begun to overcouple abuse with disagreement.
That's right.
And it's not just like liberals or lefts. It's back and forth.
Everywhere. Yep.
There's this fundamental if you disagree with me, that means X, Y, Z. Whereas could it just be that you have a different perspective? I mean, even just today. So to give some context, folks, we have shifted from daylight saving time back to standard time. And so I saw a couple of posts on Facebook about people proclaiming, which one is best. By the way, I'm a big standard person. If we could be standard all the time, I'd vote for it. But someone posted something. It was to the effect of, I don't get why people would prefer standard time. Help me understand why you don't like daylight savings time. And so a couple of people respond to his post. And what I thought was interesting, I mean, there were people who were agreeing with him, like, yes, obviously this is the way to go. But there was one person who said, oh, I prefer standard time because of X, Y, Z. And then he responds and says, yeah, I hear you, but that's not a valid argument. And I remember I was like, I thought the point was just to hear, not necessarily to persuade. And so it was just, even with that, like, can you just be with that other person's experience? You literally asked, why are there people who prefer standard time to daylight saving time? And then he shares with you what his experience, perspective, or opinion is, and you say, that's not valid. That was just, even in something as innocuous as that was interesting to observe.
Wow. Well, I was thinking there's a lot of overcoupling with extremely binary thinking, right? Like that's where I find I run into some issues or disagreements. And I agree with you where it's like we're not allowed to be uncomfortable, but that's also sort of I feel like the message or the box that the systems we live in would prefer us to not be feeling our bodies or know what's going on, how we really feel. And because so many things that I know that I've done in my life and that other people I know, it takes you out of the body, and keeps you there. And, I saw a lot during sort of the, 2016 election and stuff of people who I felt like they were back in their body because of anger, but then didn't know where to go with it. It was just sort of reactive, reflexive, reactive. And what was missing there was connection for me anyways. And so, yeah, it has been a strange path to walk, and just sort of to finally like uncouple myself from those situations and then kind of see what people's motivations are and where they're coming from, and probably trauma response most often than not. And not quite know where my role is in that, because what I want to do is the supremacy part. You should do this. Oh, well, and I mean, of course, I think that the things that we would suggest are more embodied than most, but at the same time, my first reaction is, I'm going to tell you what to do. Just like everybody else.
I always love that in our course when someone says like, oh my gosh, now that I'm learning this, I see everyone in my family through this lens, like Luis, Marika, Camille, what do I do? How can I help them? And I think all three of us are like, you can't. Like, this is your work. That's right. This is your work. You do it. See how your body feels with their body as you do it. And that, because this place of, like you said, supremacy, this like dominating response of trying to fix or help somebody, so oppressive. It's like we think in the name of help, it's really control. It's so. Did you ever did anyone here ever watch Call the Midwife?
Yes,
the Midwife?
I did.
I was
all
obsessed
11 seasons.
Okay, so you get it. And so I was obsessed, and I would be bawling my eyes out. And my wife and I were obsessed with it. We watched it a lot. And there was this one episode where this older woman is living in her house, and she's like spilling things and like dropping things because she's aging. And they're trying to get a committee to like remove her from her house and put her in an old folks home or something. And I remember really understanding through that episode again how oppressive help is in this context, because even when it's like good intention, like I want you to not fall, I was really playing with being in her body and if it was me. And I'm like, I think I'd rather fall and die in my house than in a nursing home. And I grew up in nursing homes. Two of my grandmothers and my uncle were all in nursing homes when I was in early high school. And I spent all my time, I shouldn't say I grew up, I spent a lot of time in high school in nursing homes, like helping take care of them. And for no offense to any of you listening, for me personally, I would never want to go to one. Like I'd prefer to ail at home naturally than go to a nursing home, be like waited on. And so when I was watching this episode, I was just watching again, like the innocence of the well-intentioned people. I really wanted to save this woman from falling and breaking her leg. Instead of attuning to her desire of this is my life, I'm totally cool if I fall and break my leg. And I think I get really curious about how we are in the world, individually, politically, collectively, of thinking we're supposed to save people from themselves. It's something that I find so common, and again, so well-intentioned. And this is actually where the polarities of America, like the quote left and right, could actually see the common value. They both do it in different ways. They're trying to save someone from a decision they think is wrong by like an oppressive law that would stop them from living the way they want to, like both sides. And so I just wonder about like, what is it like for you two? Do you notice, is this something that's kind of always been with you, this awareness of I'm trying to help someone and it's oppressive? Is it new from this work that we do together? Like, where does it go for you of your capacity to let someone live their life, even if they're being destructive to themselves? Like, what's that like for you? Marika just did a big dramatic thumbs down. So tell us what you mean by that.
It's something that I'm working on. It's hard. It's really hard. It's something I'm constantly working on, or let's say constantly being invited to work on.
Oh, yeah.
Whether I want to or not, right? Because now that I have this knowledge, I want everybody else to have it. And now that I feel this way, I want everybody else to feel that way, or if I see somebody is having a specific type of problem, maybe drug and alcohol, or like, something like that, not getting in the way, so that, and just being offering support without action is really hard for me, because the action in my mind is the thing that helps them, instead of just being there without judgment, in love, which I think is the better way to go about it. It's just not my first reflexive reaction. I want to control it and I want to fix it and help and get my accolades and get out.
Are the accolades like the reward of you helped me? Thank you, you're amazing. What are the accolades?
No, I mean just like feeling like I helped, feeling like I did something for someone, which is not ever 100% like selfless,
yeah, well put.
But hopefully, like, what's been best for me lately is just to listen. If someone asks for advice, then I try and go in a somatic direction. That's kind of where I'm landing, and I don't get into too much trouble.
Yeah. Where does that go for you, Camille?
So I think personally, I've never been a big like change or persuasion kind of person. I was always sort of the friend who was like, if you like it, I love it, which can sometimes be perceived as being apathetic. But what I did notice was a shift professionally. in the corporate space, a lot of times you are judged or rewarded based on your ability to persuade other people, whether it's your employees or customers, to do something different. And so you put a lot of energy and effort in doing that. And I realized that I don't want to do that. I don't want to persuade anyone. Like, even a long time, people are like, oh, you should be on the debate team. You should be a lawyer. You're so good at articulating. Yeah, I like sharing, pontificating, philosophizing. I don't like the idea of the intent is to change someone's mind. So even the more and more I got into my career, I realized, like, I don't want to be responsible for whether or not people change their behaviors, because fundamentally I couldn't be. Like, particularly once I got into diversity, equity, and inclusion, you are fundamentally being rewarded or judged as to whether or not this entire company is more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. So I can go around spouting all these different things, saying these are things you may want to implement. Here are some different recruiting practices, da 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 da. But at the end of the day, I'm not responsible for execution. Yet I was kind of being held responsible for execution. So that even just pushed me further into, like, this. No, I don't want to persuade or change people, because fundamentally I can't. There's nothing I can say or do to change anyone else. And you know how I know that? It's because there's nothing anyone can say or do to change me. I've experienced that. I've witnessed that. I think, though, for a lot of people, the frustration comes, or I'll say, let me just speak for myself. What I've observed is sort of what Marika was talking about in terms of change. There's this binary thinking. Either you accept a situation or you change it. And for me, I found a middle ground where I don't have to accept a situation, and I don't have to actively try to change other people. What I can do is focus on myself. Like we talked about in some other podcasts, we have a lot more agency over ourselves than we think we do. And so that's where I'm choosing to put my energy. And then if people see me and have questions like, there's something about you, your skin's glowing, you seem happy, what happened? Yeah. Well, let me share with you, friend. This is what I've been doing, or this is what I've been experiencing.
I love that. We both said that. I love that so much, because it's like I think it's hard to imagine you're allowed to, and I want to go into this bit with you. This idea of like not accept. Like, what does that mean what does that look like to you? Give us an example of something you wouldn't accept, but you wouldn't try to change.
So let's take corporate space. So I'm deciding to not accept the idea that the only way I can provide stability for myself or my family is by getting a job in a corporation. I'm choosing to release that. I'm not accepting that. I'm also not forcing myself to change corporate America to fit me and to fit my capacity.
What does it look like relationally? Like what if someone you love has a political stance that you don't agree with, or like they have like some like racist ideas or like homophobic or misogynist opinions? Like,
yes.
What does that look like for you?
So for me, that can look like different types of boundaries. So let's take a common example. I can have friends or family members who regularly use the F word. I am putting no energy into trying to change them as to why they shouldn't say the F word. However, what they will understand is that they're not going to say the F word in front of my children, and they're not going to say the F word in my house. If they do say the F word in front of my children or in my house, we'll have to reevaluate the dynamics of our relationship.
So you allow yourself to see the nuance of a person. Mm-hmm. Because you're not using them saying the F word and labeling them with something. You're seeing other things you love about them, and that's something that you don't work with well. Like, tell me about that. I think people listening need to hear how this works.
Yeah, so if anything, I am viewing, let's take using the F word as an example. You have your own repressed issues with gender and sexuality. That's what's really underlying that, but you're not ready to address that. And I'm not here to force you. However, what won't be tolerated around me, my children, or in my house is using inflammatory language that has often resulted in violence against a marginalized group of people.
See, I think it's a beautiful example, because we think again, I always say that you're a unicorn, DEI unicorn. And you said it too, Marika, because a lot of people that do facilitation around diversity, equity, and inclusion, they do come from a place of dominance. You know, they are saying like, no, you are harmful. If you don't change this now, you're not a good person. It's like actually a shame tactic. And then out of the charge of that, they fawn and appease, and they don't actually transform anything, but they're performing in a way that's more acceptable, but nothing's actually shifted. Mm-hmm. And I really see you like, do you remember the episode I did with Bill Riddick a while ago? Yeah, I see you in that lineage of that type of like civil rights leader and activist, because like he did it through presencing his own love for each person. Like he saw everyone as a sibling, even like the ones that were like full. I mean, he worked with leaders of the KKK as a black man. Like he knew that they were opposed to him. He knew they hated him. He knew they were doing violent things to people. Like he knew all that. And in those 10 days when he would do the charrette process, he would treat them like his family. And the more he did that, the more they would relinquish this hatred, because they experienced just unconditional kindness from someone they were trained to hate, that they inherited ideas of hatred. This lights me up, because when we can understand the nuance of relationships, that they don't have to be this hard edge of, you have one belief that opposes mine, I have to oppose all of you. It opens up like so much juiciness. And I guess I'm thinking of like Monica Guzman, you know, Marika's friend, who finally came on the podcast last week. We were like, oh, you really did?
I had we were like, I'm so excited for people to hear it. Just the first
we were
lines.
Like, right? We were like lighting each other up. Like, I need her in my life more. But it was so fun because she is from that same place of, there is so much that makes up a person. And her and I were like, we were really, everyone has heard it by now as I say it, but we were really bonding. Is that the word I want to use? Connecting, relating, from the parallel experience of our parents both voted for Trump, and we both come from like immigrant Latino families. So there was this interesting shift of the story of what a Trump voter looks like is not our families. And because we know that, we can't buy the story. Right. And it's the same thing I experience with people of color. Like, all of my friends who are black have been wealthier than I've ever been, have come from the more educated families than I came from, have a complete opposite of the stereotype that was put out by the media, even by the left, well-meaning, this overcoupling, like they're all victims that need our help, is like, not necessarily. Like, there's a lot of amazing, brilliant people in all, spans. So I told you I'm on a rambling fest today, but I'm rambling. But like, I guess it excites me because I love to question the stories I've been told about what a person is based on what they believe, who they voted for. And I think this conversation around nuance is just one we have to keep having, so people can see it and feel it and have it modeled. Because it's not being modeled when you're only watching left or right media. It's not. It's like, it's only telling you one story. I just said a lot. I'm going to pause and y'all take whatever you want from it and make some sense out of it for our listeners, please.
Well, I was totally tracking what you were saying. And I think part of the reason I like to find the nuance in people is, one, I just feel like that's reality. Going to my autistic self, like, is it logical? It just doesn't make sense. And then two, there's my personal experience. For example, I have experienced quite frequently a lot of people assuming, because I identify as a person of faith, specifically a Muslim, that I have to be transphobic, homophobic, and misogynist. And I know that's not true. And I tell them, well, guess what? Not only can I be Muslim and a feminist and an ally for the LGBTQ plus people, but guess what? There are LGBTQ plus Muslims. Mind blown, right? And so I guess with my own personal experience with that, I don't know if empathy is the right word, but like, when you've gone through it, then you can recognize it in other people. Or I'll leave it there.
I love that. Where does that go for you, Marika?
I was just sort of thinking that with the less binary my thinking is, and the more open I've been to everybody, especially the people that I didn't agree with and
Mm,
I don't agree with. That doesn't, I feel like what people do when they hear you give 1 inch to the quote unquote other side is you're in bed with Mitch McConnell or
that's right.
whatever, rather than, no, I just met this person and they happen to vote for somebody different and we had a good conversation, or we have this in common, or whatever it is. I often think about the parents, her parents, your parents, that type of thing, who to people I know would be like, oh, they're Trumpers, which, I've called people that before as well. I mean, I don't know anymore, but like, oh, they're Trumpers,
Yeah.
but like, really, they're also like grandparents, and grandparents to me are pretty innocuous, and they're,
I love that.
do you know what I mean? And
Yeah, I do.
it
I
doesn't
do.
mean that maybe the way that they voted, or that there isn't harmful thinking sometimes, or that it wasn't coming from a good place, but it's not my place to judge whether that was the case or not. It's more, what did I take away from our interaction? And if I'm going into the interaction, as I see a lot of peers doing, all ready for the fight,
Mm-hmm.
well, then,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're going to get a fight, and so it's easy to see. It's easy for me to see what I need in order to have more peaceful interactions with people and relationships. It's not necessarily easier. It's just easy to see.
I love that. I love that about you in particular, because, um, Camille's always being like, she's like the autistic queen. She's always like, I'm a walking trigger. I never wanted to change anybody. I'm always been different. and I've like, designed and created this work. And you are so cool because you come with this humility where like you get everything that we say and like believe it. And you have the reality of like, it's hard for my body. It's not a natural way for your body to move in this world. And you also notice how much it hurts you. And so I just love like our differences in these conversations we have, because I think you offer this just great reality. And I'm no offense, Camille, but when you and I talk, I'm like, this is not reality. Like most people most people are like, these two need to go fuck off.
What world are they living?
Yeah, what world are they? And so I think it's almost, it's just talk about diversity. Like it's always so nice when Marika grounds it into a reality of like, and it's hard, because like I forget to say that, because for me it's not. It's like so natural, but it is hard. It is hard. It should be hard. Like it should be hard when it's not something you practiced since birth. It's like really difficult. And you're really speaking, Marika, to the beauty of, or the reality of, the overcouplings. Any prejudice we have against anyone, it's an overcoupling. We see the person, like we were saying, Camille, someone says the F word. Like you were saying, Marika, someone votes for Trump. There's an overcoupling associated with that tells your mind and body that now you know everything about this person and they're dangerous. Mm-hmm. And in that like traumatic overcoupling, like you said, Marika, we clench up and we come in ready for a battle. Mm-hmm. And when you show up ready for a battle, there's no room for relationship. There's no room for curiosity. Mm-hmm. And I guess I get a little satiated with diversity conversations that don't include all diversity. Mm-hmm. Right? If I'm in a group of Democrats, I want people that are open to a Republican coming in the room. Like, to me, that's diverse. Like, I want diversity across the board. And so I just think it's like exciting to know that the practices we teach people actually can help them learn how to be with that. Mm-hmm. I'm curious. I'm going to ask both of you this. Out of all the practices we teach in the course, which ones have you leaned on, or pick one that you've leaned on that assists you the most when you have a traumatic overcoupling with a certain person or demographic? What assists you to feel safe, to have your heart open, to be curious? Like which one assists with that? I'm going to think too, but I want to hear what you two say first.
For me, it's finding safety.
Tell us how you do that. Like, how do you experience it so the listeners can understand?
Or it's finding safety, right? I was like, or pendulation. No, I think it's finding safety. Mostly it's that if what comes up in me is the charge of I'm in danger, or I'm just a huge charge, I'm anxious, whatever it is. It is locating the one space in my body that I know I'm actually okay. And sometimes it's sort of, I'm like going through all the different body parts, like, nope. But usually it's like my hands, okay, I'm okay. I'm like, and it's also a way for me to feel stuff, because since I'm such a freeze person, all of a sudden I just won't feel things. So that's like a really good way for me to like find something that I can feel. And once I get into that, once I can locate that or feel it or both, it's sort of easier to repair that and stay. Because if it was somebody who said something to me and it charged me up, usually what I would want to do is leave, And so being able to find that safety in myself somewhere in one part has helped me stay, but, and understand that I'm not in danger. Like, to me, I want to get to the curious part, and I can't do that if I'm in freeze or I don't feel like I'm safe. So the safety part, I also think it was the first one I ever learned. So it's the one I've done the most. So it's not the one I'm most comfortable with, but it has helped me in so many situations rather than blowing up or leaving or, that type of thing. It's great for marriage.
Oh, yeah. So I just have to expound on this a bit so people listening can hear. First of all, episode 10 is the original Finding the Safety exercise. It's very deep and you can play with that. But I love this because when you talk about this, when Marika says this, what she's really saying is when you're triggered by somebody and that activation comes in, if you're only living from the part of you that's activated, you can only do an activating thing, right? The only option is to express from an activated place because you're living from that place in your body. So you're going to have a fight, flight, fawn, or freeze response, or you're going to dissociate, But I love that when you find the safety, and what she's talking about is you literally locate a place in your body that doesn't feel that charge, a place that, okay, that person just said or did something like even offensive or scary, and what tells me I'm okay? Because in those moments where we get triggered, the whole body is attuned to the one place in our body that holds the trigger. And then we think our entire being head to toe is activated, when really it's just like our chest or our face or our hand. So when you find the safety, it teaches you, first of all, oh, there's other parts of me. But then it shows you, well, if my legs are steady right now, like what could be going wrong in this moment? And then you start living from that place. And then you don't run out, you don't scream, you don't dissociate. You can actually make a decision because you have your full brain because you're regulated. I love that. What's yours, Camille?
Well, I love finding the safety as well. So one of my go-tos. But just to add on to the repertoire, I will say in conjunction with that or similar to it, feeling the now really supports me when I'm in a really activated or intense one-on-one communication, or if I'm receiving news about things that may be happening in the world around me. And so orienting to what I'm experiencing in this moment really allows me to settle into that place in my body that has a sense of safety. And one thing I've noticed, it also allows me the space, like Marika was saying, to get curious. In particular, I've really developed a reflexive practice of saying, you're in your trauma response. I've gotten to a place where very rarely are we interacting with people, we're interacting with their trauma response. So I can first witness that they're in some sort of trauma response. And then I can get curious about, why might they be in a trauma response right now? I can't know, but I can start to ponder to myself. And if anything, if I feel like we're in a space where we can do it, I can begin to ask questions where it might come up in them. They probably don't even realize they're in a trauma response, but I could begin to ask questions and it might bring it to the surface a bit.
I love that. I love that because when you have that awareness of I'm interacting with someone's trauma response and or from my trauma response, there's this separation of the person and their trauma response. Like they aren't that response.
Yes.
It's like when someone flicks me off, I always use this example, someone like gives me the finger while I'm driving because they think I cut them off or I did cut them off, whatever happened. I'm like, oh, they're in a fight response.
Yes.
Instead of that person's an asshole. It's like, no, they're in their flight response. It's a whole different it's a mechanism. It's not who they are, right?
They're very different. And I know we always say this. There are going to be people who are like, you're bypassing, you're condoning bad behavior. No, it's just that it allows me an ability to understand how they got there. I don't think they woke up that morning that way, or they certainly weren't 3 years old in that way. Something happened. It's the same reason, and I know this is really triggering, I can empathize with or understand, like when people are like, how could someone do 9/11? I can understand how Muslims in the Middle East become radicalized. I can walk it through my brain how that could happen. In the same vein, I can walk through my brain when people say, how did the January 6th riots happen? Again, I can walk through my brain. How did that come to be? How did a group of people get to the point where they were past capacity, that they felt threatened?
There you go.
And this is how they're responding. Now, whether the threat is real or not is not the issue, but I can understand how they get to that point.
That's right. And what we're seeing with all those experiences, whether it's war, a terrorist attack, the January 6th, was it?
6th, yeah.
Yeah. I'm so bad with media.
Real dialed in.
Yeah, exactly. But like all these experiences they're these collective trauma responses that we're watching. And instead of seeing them as collective trauma responses, we see them as those people. Like Muslims can't be trusted, and all the profiling they went through all the profiling you went through for years because of it. And, like a Trumper or a white man or a white straight cis guy is now a ... It's like, no, they're not. That's one body's expression. That doesn't speak for all the bodies. And again, it's not who they are. It's an expression that came from decades of overcouplings and traumas. And if we understand, and I hear you, there's people probably right now, as I say this, like, y'all need to take like go get a real job.
HLN supported 9/11.
Right.
Go get a real job. It's like, we don't support any of these things. We look at them with an open heart so we can understand how to transform them. That's what it really comes down to. And when I think of the people I've worked with over the years, I've worked with abusive spouses, to kids, and women to kids and their spouses, like both sides. And what, many therapists would call CPS right away on these people. And is one reason I didn't get licensed is so I didn't have to legally do that. Because first of all, I didn't want kids going to the foster system. I saw much worse coming out of that. And I knew when these parents had a willingness to work with their trauma that these expressions would dissolve. And they all did. Every single one. And so people got to transform from being abusive to being nurturing and repairing the rupture of the abuse they caused because they had trauma. And to me, it's like, that's so important. Because when we see an expression as the person, we don't see an end. And that's why jails have been invented and medication is invented. We think that suppress the nature. That's not their nature. That's like one place that they naturally express from having trauma. But it's not their nature without a trauma response. No one could do those things, right? Otherwise. So I think that place, going back to these practices, for me, it's the finding the safety for sure. And it's definitely the feeling the now is huge. Those two for me, I rest upon the most. Because when I remember when I watched the January 6th.
We'll fact check that later.
It was in January.
Marika, fact check me, please. It was in January when the thing that happened in January happened. I remember sitting in my office and watching it on my computer because every client was freaking out. And of course, I had no idea what they're talking about. And I'm like, I need to go see what's happening. So I'm watching, and I remember like initially feeling this like feeling of violation in my body, and then I was like, wait a minute, hold up, I'm not even there. I'm like hundreds of miles away from DC. I'm in this incredible town where people are pretty loving. I'm looking out of the street at a woman walking her dog. I feel the sun coming on my face, and my whole body settled, and I got to watch it from a settled place. Same thing when the elections happened. I was in the bathtub, just kind of like, okay, whichever way it goes, it goes. I was enjoying my bath, and I was like, it can go any way it wants. No one's taking me out of this bath right now. They don't have the power. This is my bath. And so it's like, it's these moments of how gooey can I let my experience be? Even when something outside of me is really triggering, devastating, painful, whatever it is. And I think when we do it in the micro first, the macro, what we're saying now, that sounds really radical to some people, makes so much more sense, right? Because when you can look at your mother or your beloved and they're triggering you, and then you come back into your safety, it just gets that easy to do on the news or media, wherever it comes from, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, there's a lot of opportunities to practice.
Endless. There's endless opportunities to practice. People might be practicing right now listening to us getting triggered and playing with, okay, let me find my... And I'll actually say that before we close. Those of you listening, if you feel triggered by anything we're saying or you feel a rush or a dissociation, just pause your phone or whatever you're listening on and literally just look around the room and just practice feeling in your body what in the room is pleasant. And if pleasant is a stretch, because for some of us, pleasure is a stretch, we're not ready for that, start with what in the room is the absence of threat. I mean, a window, the walls. I'm sitting on a chair, no one's here, right? I'm on a bench and no one's yelling right now. Like, just feel the absence of threat. And you're already doing what we're talking about. You're feeling your body and simultaneously witnessing something else that could be activating, but you're staying in your place of, having agency because you're self-connected, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think just to orient us, we can't talk about it now. It's a cliffhanger. I am dying to talk about Rachel Dolezal. Dying to.
Oh,
God. I know it's going to be triggering, but like,
in my state. She's in my state, yeah. Which we
so
can. I wanted to ask one question before we close.
Go for it.
Which has nothing to do with Rachel. And everything to do with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Are you pendulating right now?
We're going to go right back.
Bring it back. Full circle.
So it's November and the movie ends at a Thanksgiving feast where Wayne Szalinski has enlarged a turkey. It's a gigantic turkey. Now, I'm not really into turkey, but I'm wondering what you would enlarge food-wise if you could.
That is a great... That's much better than my closer. Okay.
The Rachel Dolezal palate cleanser. Honestly, I think mine would be stuffing. I would just want a gigantic thing of stuffing. Because it's bread, but it's also more. Like bread and butter and seasoning.
Marika's teaching us all how she regulates, just so you know.
Pie.
Pie and stuff. Oh my God, not talking about Rachel Dolezal. So what's yours, Camille? Where do you go?
It'd probably be candy yams.
That is adorable.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love
giant.
Yeah, it's a big old thing. Again, no marshmallows. Everyone, you don't put marshmallows in your candy yams. Okay? Keep that mess out of here.
Now you just triggered some people too, I think.
Okay, now I triggered some people. Going to be the whole thing on Instagram.
That's not very inclusive of you.
Like marshmallows.
Marshmallows.
Camille is anti-marshmallow. Cool.
That's where her tolerance ends, is with marshmallows.
Yeah.
I'm with you, actually.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that. There's no amount of pendulation is going to invite a marshmallow into my yams.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got to think about this now. I'm getting all swept up in your shares. Okay. If I could enlarge one food, it would be... I don't know.
You're supposed to say bean.
Beans, yes, say beans.
I'm supposed to be on brand, right? I'm like...
It's supposed to be a gigantic bean that you can live off forever. Never have adrenaline.
I only have to soak it and cook it once. It's the most convenient bean on the planet. I'm trying to think here. I'm drawing a blank. It's not true. I told you I'm in this ADHD expression hardcore today. I'm not drawing a blank. I'm seeing like a plethora of foods and I can't pick one. Ooh. So like a Wheel of Fortune, I'm going to stop one in my mind. Vanilla cake.
What?
Vanilla cake.
Oh God! I was like, is that a vegetable I've never heard of?
On my Wheel of Fortune, there are so many things right now, vanilla, and there's this one double layered vanilla cake with some like confetti sprinkles going on. You know how they do the little like those little crown dips of the icing around the edge? Oh, yeah. Like this is hardcore. This is like a fetish.
You got it all up here. Yeah.
That's right. That was what was on my Wheel of Fortune right now. That's what I would enlarge. I would enjoy every bit of that.
I love it.
Okay. Thank you all for dealing with us in this conversation.
ADHD had a podcast.
ADHD had a podcast.
But was trauma informed.
Always is. Okay, loves. We're actually going to hop off now and dysregulate Marika because we have to practice doing Zoom karaoke for our membership. So if y'all are listening to this, go on YouTube just so you can see Marika's face at the end of this. Okay, it'll be very worth it. I promise. Okay, just want to say goodbye, everybody. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
That's the end of today's episode. Now let's take a moment to notice where we feel the episode in our bodies. Close your eyes. Take a breath. And let whatever wants to come up, come up. And remember, those sensations hold the wisdom that we're looking for. If you want to go deeper, visit holisticlifenavigation.com.